Welcome to the Jigsaw Podcast. On today's episode, my guest is Jim Ballenger. He is the pastor at the Harris Chapel Church of the Nazarene, and he also does a mentoring program for teenagers. Jim, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
Thanks for coming by. I want to talk to you about a couple things today. First of all, how did you were you from here originally, or?
Grew up in Missouri, in Rolla, which is right on the interstate, halfway between Springfield and St. Louis. Went to college in Warrensburg, which is up near Kansas City. Then finished up education down in Bethany at Southern Nazarene. Been a pastor ever since 1981.
What got you interested in being a pastor?
I had a youth group I was a part of in high school as a senior, and I really felt like God was moving on my heart to go that direction. I was heavily involved in music and wanted to go that way, wanted to be a band director. Had been impacted by the band directors I had in junior high and high school, but just really felt like this was the direction I needed to go, and God was tugging on my heart, and that's how it all started. I was senior in high school.
How's that process work when you decide you want to be a pastor?
You, at least in a lot of churches, there's the educational side, and then there's the practical side. In our particular denomination, the Nazarene Church, it's a process that involves several different courses. There's about 25 different courses you have to take, dealing with Old Testament, New Testament, church history, theology, practice, preaching, counseling, all different aspects of ministry. Also, you need to serve in a church for a number of years, anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Then you're ordained. After that, you have to take continuing education as well. So it's just pretty open, but quite a regimen. But I think a lot of businesses as well follow that model. I know we have people even in our, and you've mentioned the spin class on another podcast, that'll be gone from time to time. They work for the bank, they work for other companies, and they have to go to continuing education. So it's just kind of an ongoing thing in ministry as well.
How long have you been at Harris Chapel?
We came in March of 1998, so we're right at 21 years.
Very good. And one of the reasons I want to have you on, we had talked before about you had sent me a podcast link called Man of Order, and it was about men raising strong, disciplined young men, boys into young men, into men, and how it's kind of, I don't say absence from society, but it seems like it's a struggle for a lot of people nowadays. You do a mentoring program.
Right.
What is that called?
Well, we're in the early stages of it, and it's happening in the Wapahani School. They've had some helps that they've provided for kids in the elementary ages. I think a lot of that was just helping kids feel like they belonged in school. A lot of kids in elementary school still pretty much not used to being away from home, away from their parents. So this was kind of a way to help kids feel like somebody was there to care for them and kind of build a bridge in the school and the elementary. I noticed, especially after listening, as you mentioned this Order of Man, I noticed Ryan Mickler, the guy that is the head of that group, it just struck me. In fact, my son's the one that put me onto the podcast. It struck me that this guy, his whole purpose was men need to grow up to be men, to be men that are there to provide for their family, to protect their family, to really give leadership. We live in a time where people are confused, and especially teenagers, as to where they even fit in. We talk about drugs and alcohol and all kinds of other suicidal tendencies. In many cases, I think that happens because these boys don't have a model or a mentor to really let them know what it means to be a man. And sometimes it's their own upbringing, whether they have a single parent home or maybe they're being raised by grandparents. So it's a big concern, and I see in society that we step up to mentor these guys, to show them. I mean, there are programs like Scouts, Boys Club, things like that. I like this approach because it's like that one-on-one approach to just sit down and say, okay, how are your grades? How are your friends in school? What's going on in your life? What do you like to do? Did you see a movie recently? I mean, there's all kinds of things you can discuss, and it's in a very I like the setting at school. It's during the school day. You sit down with the young man, and I believe you have to have men mentoring men, women mentoring women, to just check on them and just see what their struggles are, what their joys are. Sometimes these kids don't have anybody else asking them those questions.
Yeah, it seems like teenagers just want attention, and they're going to get attention, whether it be through acting out, causing trouble. If they can get that positive attention, like I'm sure you guys are giving them, that probably just helps them give them confidence that they feel wanted, feel needed, have a purpose.
Right. And I think too, it helps us, and this is at least my approach at this point, is to get in contact with the parents to make sure we're not doing anything behind the parents' back. Coordinate that effort with the parents, the administration, any particular teachers. If the student's having a hard time in a class, I've discovered the teachers are all very willing to support, to communicate with me any concerns they have. The school counselor. It really takes that community effort to have the kid and to have the children or the teens right there in the middle of it. They're actually the ones in the driver's seat, especially as teenagers. They have a lot more freedom. We give them almost, I think, too much, but anyway, they need to be in the process as well.
Do you think a lot of these, you've dealt with this before, a lot of these teenagers are coming from either homes that are broken homes, parents just aren't around, or if they are around, they're not real present?
I think that's a big concern, whether it be a broken home, or if they do have parents around, maybe mom and dad, they aren't married. Maybe they've had the boyfriend for a couple years and he disappears, another one shows up, or maybe they're just doing their own thing. Maybe they're involved in trying to find what their goal is in life, and the kids don't have anybody showing them a path.
The teenage years are obviously awkward. We've all been through them. Do you feel that teenagers are more vulnerable today than, say, 25, 30 years ago?
I do. I think there are so many more things through social media. I'm not against social media. My concern is we need to monitor social media. Youth have things that they can be exposed to on social media now that my kids, our youngest is 25, they weren't exposed to. And I definitely, back when I was a kid, had no clue about these things. So it's just a lot more accessible through social media.
Yeah, because I'm 33, and when I was in high school, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was nothing.
Right.
And I think part of the problem is if these teens have a rough day at school or they're getting bullied or whatever. When I was a kid, you went home, you had dinner, you played, and you went to bed, and you got away from it. Well, now with social media, it's always in your face. It's always there.
Right, and I think you see this as well. The parents are on whether they're on their iPhone or tablet or laptop, whatever, so they're doing their thing, and the kids are doing their thing. And this gets back to the mentoring, there's no connection in the home. Then when things go wrong, the parents like, well, we didn't see that coming. It's a big concern that everybody's kind of off, segregated in several different areas, not even connecting.
Yeah, you mentioned the social media for parents. It seems like even though parents are in the home, if they're not there being present to that child, it's really no different than not being there.
Right. And sometimes parents, we confuse the idea of like, well, we were home together, but they not necessarily were together because they were off doing all these things. And it used to be back in the day, somebody was on the telephone. Well, now they're off, like you mentioned, Facebook, other social media places, and maybe they're video gaming endless hours. They're really not connecting. They may be under the roof, but they're not really together as a family.
Now, you said this program is just kind of in its infancy.
It is, and we're linking up. There's a guy on YouTube, Josh Shipp, SHIPP, that came from a broken home himself, had 2 different dads growing up, and by the time they came and went, his mom ended up just raising him as a single-parent mom. He really had no place. Finally, had a person that came into his life as a teenager, foster couple, that basically just said, we're going to be here for you, and no matter what you do, we're going to be here. He calls it One Caring Adult. He has a great short video clip, about a 3-minute clip on YouTube. The illustration he uses is when we are born, it's like there's this jar full of marbles, just kind of a word picture, and each marble represents a week. So if you take from 0 to 18, multiply that times 52, say we have 1,000 whatever marbles. Well, every week you take a marble out. By the time these kids are in high school, they may be only down to, like this person I'm mentoring as a junior, he'll be 18 in August. I'm only down to about 25 marbles with him before he turns 18. And we all know everything changes at 18. So it's that thought that I'm going to have that intentional focus on mentoring him, whether it be with social issues, education issues, and I, as a pastor, I can work in some of the spiritual issues as well.
Now, as this program grows, are you going to be looking at ways to keep these teenagers occupied with positive activities? Because it seems like if you're busy, you're more likely to stay on track instead of that free time, and we all know free time can lead to bad things.
Right, exactly. That's a good point. We're talking about that. We have a group that's organized in the Selma area now. It involves people that are willing to step up and dedicate an hour a week. It involves background checks, of course. You have to have background checks if you're going to work with the youth. There are definite parameters. You're not off privately with them. It's during the school day. There are other things. There's training involved so that you know how to lead the youth through the mentoring process. And it is. There's some fun things that will happen together as well. Probably a party or two during the year at the school. Something I've done for a number of years is to be they call it chaplain. I think of it as a chaplain, but as a mentor for the basketball team. Since 2010, the coach asked me to be involved with that. I go to each of the games, home games, away games. I get to have a prayer with the guys in the locker room. The big thing, though, to me is how I can, when I see them throughout life, even as adults, beyond high school, you'll see them at Walmart. You'll see them at the mall. You may be out to eat at the Roadhouse. In fact, you may be at the Roadhouse, and they may be one of the servers. My thought is this. We want to continue to keep that awareness and that visibility beyond the high school years so that these kids know that they do matter. That the high school, like you said a minute ago, Jake, high school is a very trying and testing times. These kids are unbelievable peer pressure. They're thinking a lot more about dating. They're thinking a lot more about they're getting ready to drive. They may have a part-time job. Just all kinds of, and the pressures that come, the availability of different drugs and things of that nature.
Yeah, the drug availability now, I mean, compared to 15, 20, 25 years ago, seems
sure
so accessible to anyone.
Right. And another thing now, I have a good friend that teaches and works up at Blackford. A lot of schools now, and they have all these meetings. Teachers do security meetings and other meetings. A big thing now is vaping. Not just, vaping was a thing that people said, well, instead of smoking, we'll vape. It's morphed into something now that has involved drug use as well. I'm learning this on the fly, that kids can even get, say, marijuana, and somehow, I don't even know how it works, can get it in a ballpoint pen and just vape through that, and you don't even know it's happening. So these are things we have to be aware of, not just, and I like what you said a minute ago about the positive influence. I don't want to be the Gestapo. I don't want to be the heavy. I want them to know it's a safe place as well, that I feel like they need to be accountable. They also need that encouragement.
Yeah, encouragement, sense of accomplishing something, whether it be good grades, just
Sure.
a little bit of positive reinforcement. And I think building confidence.
Big thing. Confidence is huge because these kids, you said it earlier, they're seeking approval. They're seeking attention, however they can act out. Back in my day, stuff like seeking attention would be involved with, take your car out on a county road and have fun running up and down the county road, or go to the local drive up and just hang out and do stupid stuff there. But it's gotten a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you mentioned, we talked about broken homes. Now, you do premarital counseling.
I do. I have a program that it's not mine. It's called Prepare Enrich. People can see it online, prepareenrich.com. It's an assessment. You have a counselor, and I've been through the training. You have a counselor that gives you each a code. You fill it out, husband, wife, or dating, male, female, separately. All the answers are meshed together. You have the results that you have as the counselor. You sit down with them. And the great thing about this is I'm not sitting down trying to give them all my stuff. What I'm doing is I'm sitting down with the assessment and I see how they agree as a couple with issues such as communication, problem resolution, child raising, just their views on how to raise children, finances, sex, friendships. How are they introverted, extroverted? All kinds of ways to look at it, and it helps. I've been through this with several couples. I think it really helps them get a grounding for marriage and awareness. You and I both know that even after you're married, you're always learning, and you're always growing, and there are going to be challenges. It's just this gives you an awareness going in that it's not just blind. You do have an open eyes.
The divorce rate in America is what, between 40 and 50%?
Right. Yeah.
Why is it so high? What is your opinion on why it's so high?
I think marriage has always been. I don't want to be funny here, but men and women are just different. We're wired differently.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we take a different approach to things. Men are naturally driven to solve problems. Sometimes women, when they bring up an issue, I'll just kind of go off on a tangent here for a second. When a wife brings up an issue, she may not want you to solve it. She just needs somebody to talk to, somebody that'll listen, somebody that'll just say, yes, I hear you, I understand. Guys, when we hear a situation, our immediate thing is, well, if you just did this, this, and this. So then you kind of have the friction. My parents, who've been married 63, almost 64 years, it's not been a cakewalk. There have been some very difficult times. Nothing tragic. It's just the communication that you have between male and female. I think there was just more of a determination back in the day that, hey, come what may, we're gonna see it through. We're gonna stick this out. It's become so common anymore, almost like trade. And I hate to think of this as an illustration, but I've heard it, like trading cars. Well, you don't like that one, just trade it in for another one.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny you mentioned the man wants to solve the problem, the wife wants you just to listen. That is me and Jill, and I have to really catch myself and just sometimes just shut up and listen.
Yeah.
But it's hard. That's how we're wired.
Right. And I laugh because this in May, my wife and it'll be 39 years, and I still have to catch myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm just so wired to just like, well, all you have to do is 1, 2, 3, 4, and she's like, no. So.
Yeah. And I think that's just. Men and women's DNA are just different. That's the way it's always going to be.
Yeah.
And it'll always be a challenge. Couple of reasons I've talked to people about divorce. Do you think it's maybe just an impulse decision that they made too fast, or is it just because it's so easy to get out of nowadays? It's not looked down upon like it used to be?
The last thing, not looked down upon, I think it's so much more common. When I was a child growing up, I may have only known 1 or 2 couples that my parents were friends with that had been divorced. It was just you never thought about. I mean, back in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, growing up, you just didn't know anybody. Maybe like 2 couples ever. So it's a lot more prevalent now. I think it's tough to. I know some people have the idea that, well, if they just live together for a while, they can kind of just test and see if kind of like living together is a test for marriage. To me, that's a misnomer because you get a false reading. It's not the same as being married. That's why I think the premarital counseling gives you that awareness of what you're looking at. And I think people are not as determined. I don't know what the word is, commitment, determined, passionate about seeing things through. You see it whether it be school or jobs, all different kinds of things. And marriage just becomes another thing that people say, well, I change jobs, I'll change marriage, change cars, change marriage, change homes. You don't have very many people that have the same career path their whole life, the same home for a number of years. And marriage just falls into that trap.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like for when Jill and I got married 4.5 years ago, to me the work started day one. Getting married was a great day, but that's when the work started.
Exactly.
The easy part was leading up to that.
Sure.
Especially when you start getting into the finances.
Sure.
Started having children, and it seems like a lot of divorces, I'm sure, are caused by finances or children. It
really, finance and communication are like the top 2. and that's why communication. In fact, that's a book that somebody recommended when Janie and I got married, was Communication Key to Your Marriage by Norm Wright. And the book dealt with this thought that if you can just communicate, even bad communication is better than none at all. So, and it had all kinds of pointers. I'm thinking about, 39 years ago now, and it still is there in my mind, the idea of seeking to understand the other person, seeking to listen more. There's a scripture that says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, over in James chapter 1. I'm like, yeah, I need to be quick to listen. Let her finish her sentence. Let her finish her thought before I jump in, because, and this can be a detriment if you're married a long time, is you think you know what they're going to say before they say it, and they may say it or they may have something else. Yeah. But to cut them off really hurts. So it's just that idea of the communication and the finances, and communicating about finances, communicating about children, communicating about expectations, communicating about purchases, communicating about friendships, families. And the big three really are finances, family, and extended family. Sometimes in-laws can be the hardest.
Yeah, when Jill and we did the premarital counseling as well, and I know one exercise we did was the active listening, where you sit and they complete a thought, and then you have to interpret it, and it was very challenging,
right?
Because you just don't naturally do that,
right? It's funny. Ryan Mitchell, on one of his Order of Man podcasts, they were talking about this idea, and he said we look at marriage as like, well, that person is my soulmate, they complete me, they're kind of the yin and yang thing. He said, I don't think, and this is just him speaking, I don't think wives were given to us to compliment us. They were given to us to challenge us. And it was kind of funny because I thought, yeah, sometimes marriage is very challenging. I've told couples this all along. I said, you will find more joy than anywhere else in your life in marriage. You will find more frustration than anywhere else in your life in marriage. You cover the whole spectrum.
Now, we mentioned this with the teenagers, but the social media, I'm sure, has played a large effect in many divorces in the last 10, 15 years.
I can see that. I really can. In fact, it sets up a false hope. Sometimes you hear people, they'll have a test. They go to the doctor, have a test. They say, well, it was a false positive. Social media sets up a lot of false hopes. It puts an image out there, whether it's, even if it's somebody's profile picture or the description about them, it sets that up as the ideal. You really can't get to know someone until you sit down and just have a cup of coffee with them, or just maybe sit next to them at a sporting event, or just something like that. You have to see people. The real FaceTime is like when you're in the room with that person.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned finances. It seems like more and more people are living outside of their means than they probably did 40, 50 years ago, which forces, the husband and wife to work.
Sure.
Which is a good thing if that's what they want, but that added stress of financial insecurity every month has to be a factor as well.
It is. A lot of that is based on the expectations. I believe the expectation of society that says, if you want to be that person that is a person of worth, you need to have this type of home. You need to have this type of furniture. You need to have this type of vehicle. All the things that you're expected. This type of job. All those things that are just things. And we miss the relationships along the way. And I think as I get older, I see that more and more, that I don't need the stuff. My wife and I both, we're not minimalist by any means, but we're definitely downsizing. And as we do that, we're not telling other people they have to. It's just that we've found, and Dave Ramsey helped us with this on finances, to really look at what you have. Why do you have that? Is it functional? Does it add value to your life? A lot of times we get caught up, as you said, in the debt and the whole living outside our means, because we feel like we have to have something, and then we lose that person that's closest to us, or our kids, in our pursuit of all the stuff.
Yeah, Jill and I have kind of went through that when she decided she wanted to stop being a school counselor and stay at home with her son. We kind of built a life on two incomes, and then she decided to stay at home, which is a decision we both 100% wanted, but it's changed our perspective as far as, Now on Friday night, instead of going out to a fancy dinner, we stay at home and cook.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of helped that, we stay around home more, or if we go do something, it's a walk through a park and not a movie, an expensive movie, or, like I said, going out to eat or some big activities. And I think it's kind of brought us closer in that way.
Sure.
Just being simpler.
I can see that 100%. And as Blair grows up, it'll be more evident as your family. And those are the things kids remember. They remember those times as a family together. I guess kind of lost here in a thought, but just again back to, it kind of comes almost full circle back to mentoring, to where the kids need to see those caring relationships, and they're looking for those relationships. And the sad thing is they look in wrong places. They end up in drugs. They end up in a relationship where they're where a young lady may turn up pregnant. They end up in a relationship where somebody just does something. I mean, car wrecks, all these different things. I mean, just the whole issue of trying to fit in and feel like they matter, to where if they had adults, and this is where I come back to this thought of the whole community, or as one former presidential candidate put it, a village. It really is a concept that we need to be in this together. Neighbors that are looking out for each other, neighbors that are looking out for each other's kids. If back when our kids were growing up, if they did something wrong, I wanted the neighborhood parents to tell me. We lived in Fort Worth, Texas at the time when our kids were young, and all of them were at home. Had a lot of families, as you mentioned earlier about your neighborhood, a lot of families with kids about the age of our kids. And if our kids did something bad at their house, I mean, if they broke something like a vase or something, or if they put their hand through knocked out a door with a baseball bat or a window, we wanted to know. And our kids were held responsible for that. And it was the same way with those kids coming to our house. And we as parents were very supportive of each other, so that the kids knew they had to be responsible.
Now, with the divorce rate being so high now, and over the last probably 10 to 15 years, do you see the generation of kids now growing up in that environment, almost accepting that as the norm as they get older and get into marriages?
I do. It's a sad reality, and people that live together and choose not to get married. One of the things that Ryan Mickler talks about, I even heard it on a podcast earlier today, talking about just relationships, and he just said, if you're in a relationship and you're having, and this sounds very countercultural in our current day, if you're in a relationship having premarital sex and you're not married, you're short-circuiting the system. And I thought it was pretty interesting, because here's a guy that on his podcast, if you listen to Order of Man very often, he'll have like former Navy SEALs and other outdoorsy type people. Their language can be pretty cutting edge. A lot of words that I would not use in the coffee shop or in church, and but at the same time, he's very focused on role responsibility, back to masculinity, back to being an adult, back to men being men, and taking that responsibility.
Yeah, and I don't think, they talk about masculinity and men being men. It's not being some big tough guy that wants to fight everyone. It's
right.
Being responsible for your family. It's being accountable for your actions. It's being a role model to your children, being obviously faithful and supportive of your wife. I think people think masculinity, they think these big tough guys that want to fight and do all that, and that's
Sure.
not masculinity to me. That's not being a man.
No, you're absolutely right. It's being responsible. I keep coming back to that word. And when we mess up, we just say, hey, you know what? I messed up. Now, sometimes people may think that looks like weakness, but usually what people do is they'll blame somebody else. Well, my job, my boss, the environment, the people I work with, the people I live with. And we start, but that's not responsibility, and it really shows more of a weakness with men. That's one of the things I keep coming across with this masculinity is that we need to stand up and lead. And it's not that our wives, we're not cavemen, we're not dragging them behind us. We are wanting to be the leader so that they can be the women that they're called and designed to be. In fact, one of the things he mentions is the more that we take on our role in masculinity, the more they can take on their role in femininity and being true strong women. He's all about strong women.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone says men and women are created equally, and yes, that's true. But to another point is there are things that men can do that women can't, and vice versa. Right. Men are not nurturing by nature.
Exactly, and that's something he keeps pointing out, and I agree that a lot of times men we're out to fix things, and sometimes we're fixing the things that we broke earlier, but women are very much nurturers. When one of our kids would wreck on the bike growing up, it'd be like, well, get back up and try it again, and the mom's like, hey, wait a minute, we need to see if we need to put some cream on that or a Band-Aid, and the bone's not sticking out, just stuff like that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned responsibility and accountability. It's something that is important to everyone, but it seems to be lacking in a lot of people. To get that accountability, I think it starts, like you mentioned with the mentoring, starting young. Even if it's just the smallest task, making your bed each morning.
Right.
Having small chores as a kid that grows into a part-time job as a teenager, into your schoolwork, into a career, into a family.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. With our kids, all four of them had jobs while they were in high school and also while they were in college. We wanted them to get that early on. It concerns me sometimes kids, because the job, it wasn't so much about them having money and buying things as it was the responsibility of understanding that, hey, with the cell phone or with insurance on a car or other things, that this is life. Some kids don't even have their first real job until they're out of college. They wake up with a big college debt and car payments and insurance, and then they want a house and all the utilities and such. It helps that along the way. And one thing is, they will make mistakes. Why not help them learn while they're still at home at 16, 17, 18 years of age? Walk them through that. Now, I'm not saying you bail them out every time, but it becomes that learning experience and a teachable moment to where they can be stronger. So when they do leave to go on to college, or they leave college to get out into a full-time career, they've had those experiences.
Yeah, and mistakes and failure is important. I think it's important to fail. It's important to make mistakes.
Right.
Not stupid mistakes.
Right.
Not drinking and driving, but learning on the job. You make mistakes or do something wrong, learning from that. Right. If we always succeed, there's nothing to learn from. I mean, playing sports was that way for me.
Yeah.
I played high school baseball. I played into college. Losing in games, you learn more from a loss than you ever did a win.
Right. And I've seen that. I've seen coaches that have taken that and turned it around with their team. It becomes that teachable moment in the locker room where they're walking through the X's and O's and saying, wow, this is where we really missed it. We weren't ready. We weren't thinking. We weren't aware. We gave up. We let off the pedal, whatever phrases they use. And it is. I think that's where our kids need to see that. Some kids, they look at it like it's all over, which is almost hilarious when they're 16, 17 years old. They don't even know what starting is yet. So we can walk them through that as somebody who's engaged in their life. I know some parents, and probably there have been those, have been accused of being helicopter parents, trying to be too smothering. That almost has, I think, in some ways taken us back to where, like, well, just hands off totally. No, there needs to be some kind of connection. Let them make the mistakes, but also help them learn from the mistakes.
Yeah. And, if you're not, and I think one thing as far as challenging yourself where you are going to make mistakes, if you get comfortable, and I've talked about this before on other podcasts, if you get comfortable and not out there challenging yourself, you're not going to grow.
Exactly. And that's where you have to have a plan. That I heard just quick side story. We were on a trip with a group to Israel. We had a tour guide that he was former Israeli army. Every day when he got on the bus, he said, "Today we have a plan." That is all part of the mentoring. It's part of these, with raising our kids. To what is your plan? What is your goal? What is your purpose? I'm not saying you look at an 8 or 10-year-old and talk about them becoming a medical doctor or a CPA. I'm talking about them having, as you mentioned earlier, that discipline in their life. Do they have activities that do they make their bed every day? Do they help clean up dishes around after the meal? Do they do their homework before they get to do videos and things like that? We're mentoring them all the time. So I think, they need to have that challenge outside of what can just be normal.
Yeah, and it's easy as adults to get out of that out of that challenging yourself. I did it last year. I did a whole podcast on it. I got lazy. I just blatantly got lazy. I got back into it and got my discipline back, and now I feel better. I'm happier, and I feel more accomplished.
Right. And I think that's you have to always check the gauges. That's something that this Order of Man has helped me. I keep referring to that. They have a whole battle plan notebook that talks about helping you stay focused. It just goes back to this guy on the bus saying, today we have a plan. We started that morning. We went to different places. We got back to the hotel that evening. He said, now let's review what we did today. It's so easy for us with all the choices of things we can do in life, video things, social media things, just sitting home in front of the TV and all the numerous channels we can watch, whether it be movies or TV shows or sporting events or whatever, reality TV, that we get lost in, well, what are we doing? You know, are we really getting outside of ourselves onto the active engagement of life? Or are we just kind of sitting back on the sidelines?
Yeah, and it seems like people are so worried about what everyone else is doing, especially the negativity that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to wade through it to get to something positive. And I feel it should be the other way. It's not, because negativity is easy.
Right. It is. And social media has helped us with that. I heard just last week, I couldn't remember if it was NPR or somebody else I was listening to. They said that if somebody would give up social media for 30 days, they would be a much more positive person immediately. Also, they would be less polarized in political matters, because social media has caused both of those things to happen. The drive toward go negative with this, whether it be a relationship, or go negative with this, whether it be politics.
Yeah, and like with my Facebook, you know, obviously with the podcast and my wife's photography business, we're on Facebook promoting our businesses.
Sure.
It's essential. What I've done, I've went through and unfollowed many people who are very negative. I just don't need it. I don't want to see it. And I've replaced those with positive people, whether it be, you know, the Man of Order podcast, I follow him, or there's others out there that are really good to follow. And it helps.
Yeah.
It helps when you get on Facebook, because I'm on it, and you see positive or encouraging or motivational and not the negative.
I think, like you say, one of the biggest helps we have right now are podcasts, like your podcasts and others, that can help people get in a mode of listening and learning and applying. And I was caught up in this for a while, for a number of years, with talk radio. And sometimes people get caught on TV with all the reality shows and talk shows during the day. It's like a wind tunnel that cycles downward into a negative mindset. To me, podcasts, like you mentioned, we talked about Order of Man, you mentioned Jordan Peterson, Jocko Willink, and others. They give you some things that stretch you. You listen to people who have lived on the edge. I listened to a guy the other day, was like a base jumper. I'm like, what's this all about? You know, I mean, these are people that just truly are living on the edge, that are doing things that we don't even think about. And it stretches us to move beyond our little bubble.
Yeah, because the AM radio, you know, whether you're left-leaning, right-leaning, they're just going to bash ideas in your head, and you don't think about them. It's just, that's what they're going to say. You sit there and listen to it, and you don't absorb it. Where a podcast, you can kind of pick what you want to listen to, whether it be a former Navy SEAL or Jordan Peterson, who's a psychiatrist and a tenured professor, and you really, your brain really gets going, because you're thinking about what they're saying, you're thinking how you can apply that to your life, or if you have, or if you haven't, if you're going to. That's the benefit I've found in them, is I feel like when I'm sitting there at work or driving, I'm bettering myself.
Sure.
Or getting ideas to better myself if I act on them.
Well, that's it. And there are so many tools with different I didn't realize how many podcasts, different ones there are out there, that can help with anything from like this, like Jordan Peterson, psychologist, or help with fitness, that help with nutrition, that help with sports in the way of just being outdoors, hunting, fishing, of that nature, that really get your mind working in an intentional way, instead of just coasting. I hit this, I'm 59 now. About 5 years ago, I just hit this point, and I thought, I don't want to coast. I know when I'm going to retire and what I'm going to do after I retire, and I don't want to coast until that time. I see a lot of people whether it be in education or, and I'm in ministry. I see a lot of ministers that do that. They get in a groove and like, hey, let's just kind of just land this plane gradually. And I don't want to be that person. I want to leave. I was taught, did a lot of camping growing up, and I was taught, when you leave the campsite, when you go back home, leave that thing cleaner than it was when you got there. My parents instilled that in my life. I was raised with that work ethic. We've raised our kids that way. Make things to where they're better than when you found them. And that's just part of that giving mentality.
Yeah, I was that way last year. It would have been real easy to settle into not working out, coming home, going to my job, settling at that job, coming home, playing with Blair, which was, that's, like I said, the best part of the day, still is.
Sure.
Watching the same TV shows every night from 7:30 to 10:30, go in bed and repeat.
Sure.
And I got on that path, but through listening to podcasts and people making me think I can do more, I can challenge myself, and it just kind of got the ball rolling, and I'm in a better place now than I have been in a few years.
Sure. A lot of that too is when you get engaged, kind of back to our thought here earlier with mentoring, when you're engaged in the lives of youth or children, or maybe your thing is senior adults. There's some people that maybe they don't want to be around children and mentor children, but they can go to the nursing home. They can go to, now they have adult daycares. They could go there and minister there, just play checkers or play, help the folks with a puzzle, crossword puzzle, do their nails or play bingo. To get outside, and the whole mentoring thing is not just, my thought and my real passion now is mentoring toward high schoolers, which I would encourage anybody to step up and get engaged in, because kids are hungry, like you said, they're just hungry for the attention. Or maybe their thing is to get involved with scouts. I know scouts have become such a political thing, but I hope we don't lose, because our son's an Eagle Scout, I hope we don't lose the pure original purpose of scouts. We're wanting to make strong citizens that are responsible, that understand the please and thank yous as you go through life, and the work ethic. It could be Boys and Girls Club. There's all kinds of opportunities to mentor. Maybe you want to spend some time at the Muncie Mission and help mentor those guys to get them back on a good path, because those guys do have they have a plan. They have a template that they're walking through for maybe it's a year or 2 years for rehabilitation and back on a path of a solid life. There's all kinds of ways we can mentor and help people. So that really is my thing. And I know people call it giving back or pay it forward. However you describe it, just do something,
Yeah, I think everyone thinks charity and helping out, and they think money.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people don't have extra money to donate, which I totally get that. We've been there. We're kind of there now.
Mm-hmm.
But your time.
Yeah.
Your time is more valuable to that person you're going to sit and play checkers with.
Sure.
Or that kid you're going to talk to about his homework or whatever. Do something that helps out. That's kind of why I started this podcast.
Sure.
I wanted to allow people to have a platform to tell either their story of something they've been through, or like I had Kat Knox on. She talked about the YWCA.
Sure.
Most people don't even know that's a women's shelter.
It is. And in fact, we have a group from our church that go there one Sunday a month. They will take breakfast. They will do a little Bible study, mostly just to interact. No real hard sell type, if you call it that. It came to our attention that the ladies, speaking of the YW, interesting you brought it up, the ladies there, they have like a bed and a little dresser. I haven't been in any of the rooms, but I'm told they don't even have like a recliner in their rooms, a chair, much more than just a desk chair. We found out one of the ladies had some kind of surgery. Post-surgery, part of her rehab was she needed to sleep in a rocker recliner. Well, they didn't have it. So kind of put a burr on our saddle, and we started raising money for Lazy Boys. I don't know how many we ended up with, but that was kind of just something that people could give to. So sometimes people think of the giving, like you say, it's money, but you're right, it really is time. Especially these days, when we take that time and invest in somebody else, we feel, it feels good, first of all. It is a sense of accomplishment. We're doing something outside of ourselves. And obviously it helps that other person.
Yeah, and I've been guilty of this using, I just don't have the time. If you really look at how you spend your time throughout a day, there's a lot more there than you think. And I've learned this over the last 6-7 months.
Sure.
If you cut out pointless television, if you stay off Facebook for that 1 hour a day, one thing that helps me is get up early. Mm-hmm. Go to bed a little earlier, get up earlier. You can find time to do, even if it's a half hour,
Sure.
a couple days a week to go talk to someone at the YWCA or help mentor a teenager or, volunteer at a church, whatever it might be.
Sure.
There's time out there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned about monitoring our time. I just noticed with the recent iOS update on our phones that they now have a feature that's automatically on your iPhone that tells how much time you've spent on your phone that day, whether it be social media, networking. I think there's 2 or 3 other
It's
ways.
probably scary.
Well,
Could be scary to know how much time you actually do spend on your phone.
It was. The first day I was on there, it really did scare me because it was like 5 or 6 hours. And I thought, really? I think now I have it down to about an hour and 20 minutes or so because I just thought that's time that's not being used, like we get back to mentoring, where I could be helping someone else. And sometimes we can use that. Maybe it's just a phone call that somebody needs that's just come through a tragedy. We had a neighbor here in the area that lost a loved one over the weekend, and it's time that we need to take and kind of show some concern for that family, So,
yeah, and it might not be volunteering at an organization. It could be a good friend of yours that you haven't talked to in a year that might be struggling. Just a phone call, not a text message.
Right.
Not an email. Pick up the phone, talk to them. That might help their day because you don't know what people are going through.
Yeah. One more thing. It's kind of funny. At Christmas time, we were wrapping gifts at Walmart South. We were in that little, as you check out at Walmart South, there's an area where they have some like video games and other toys there. We set up the tables, and it was amazing when people walked by, people we even knew, they looked like they were so off, like they were distracted, like they were in deep thought about something else. And sometimes when you see people in a setting like that, you talk about, don't email them, just see them, talk to them on the phone, interact with them at the store. Just take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and just catch up with them. Just say, hey, I'm so glad to see you. How's your mom? How are your kids? How are you? Things like that.
Yeah, and I think with people would rather message and stuff. That's one reason I really enjoy podcasts because it's people sitting and just having conversation. This is my 10th one.
Sure.
No one's checked their phone.
Mm-hmm.
There's no phones on the table. We're just sitting here having conversation, and that's really absent in society right now. You go to a restaurant, you see a couple, and they're both on their phone.
Oh yeah.
And it's like that's time you guys could be communicating like we talked about.
Yeah. I had a pastor friend. We were at Cracker Barrel over in Anderson. He, his wife, and their 4 kids came in and sat down around one of the round tables at Cracker Barrel. Within the first 3 minutes, all of them had a cell phone out. They were all, and I just happened to know his number, so I texted him. I said, "Hey, why don't you put your phone down and have dinner with your family?"
Yeah.
The look on his face. We both laughed, but it was a teachable moment.
Yeah, me and my wife, we try. We sit down with our son every night and eat dinner together, and it's kind of a rule. We might turn music on on one of the phones, but we put it off so we can sit and talk, and it's really helped us. Like I said, it's just that extra time. We're busy. I work all day and I come home, and that's a nice half hour, 45 minutes where we can just sit and talk and not worry about other things or other people.
And we need that. We need that. That's one thing I remember. Statistics always in the past, it was said, how much time do we spend with our kids every day? How many meals do we at least eat one meal a day with our kids? A lot of families don't because they're all so scattered. My wife and I still have to be intentional. It's just the 2 of us at home. We have to be intentional to say, hey, we're going to take time and talk.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's several days that we haven't connected like we should.
Yeah, me and Jill, we were in at her sister's house in Columbus, Ohio last weekend, and her sister watched Blair Force in the morning, and our date consisted of Waffle House, and we just walked around IKEA.
Yeah,
we'd never been, and it was a
you made it out.
We found our way out. We had to look at the maps and the arrows. It's a very confusing place, but that was our morning. Yeah. We couldn't go out that night. It's really expensive to go out to eat, so we made a morning. We just found the time.
Sure. And you have to get creative. I mean, we were raising our kids. Very rarely did we go out to eat. Maybe we go to Pizza Hut, get a pizza, and take it home and eat it, or a couple pizzas. Some special. It was amazing how much we could save money and spend time together. Mm-hmm. You have to be intentional. You have to be creative.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, talking. Like I said, just a couple topics we had been messaging about, and I thought let's do a podcast on this because I think it's really prevalent now. Not teenagers having issues, the divorce rate, and I think if we could just kind of slow things down, maybe it'll help a couple people.
Sure.
And get outside of ourselves and help each other. So Is there a way people can follow you, your church, or your mentoring program?
Uh, I've gotten off of social media, but I think, I mean, I'll give you my cell number. I don't mind, 765-748-0276. Feel free to call me, or if you're checking with Jake here and listening to his podcast, Harris Chapel, we're just on the southeast side of Prairie Creek Reservoir. You're welcome to come see us. We do have a website, harrischapelnaz.com. But feel free to come to church. Come check. Just call me during the week. I'll meet you at Starbucks for a cup of coffee. I'll buy your coffee. So it means that much to me to be able to connect with people.
Good deal. Hey, I appreciate your time. As always, you can contact me with any questions at the Jake Sewell Podcast at gmail.com and on Instagram at the Jake Sewell Podcast. Thanks.